However well disposed a person may be, why, you see, we leave off after a time seeing persons who are in sorrow. They make one feel melancholy. And so at last old Dante was left all to himself, and I only saw from time to time strangers go up to him and come down again with some bundle they tried to hide. But I guessed what these bundles were, and that he sold by degrees what he had to pay for his subsistence. At length the poor old fellow reached the end of all he had, and he owed 3/4 of rent, and they threatened to turn him out. He begged for another week, which was granted to him. I know this because the landlord came into my apartment when he left his. For the first 3 days I heard him walking about as usual, but on the fourth I heard nothing. I then resolved to go up to him at all risks. The door was closed, but I looked through the keyhole, and saw him so pale and haggard, that believing him very ill, I went and told Monsieur Morrel, then ran on to Mercédès. They both came immediately, Monsieur Morrel bringing a doctor, and the doctor said it was an inflammation of the bowels, and ordered him a limited diet. I was there too, and I never shall forget the old man's smile at this prescription. From that time he received all who came. He had an excuse for not eating any more, and the doctor had put him on a diet. The abbé uttered a kind of groan. "The story interests you, does it not, sir?" inquired Caderousse. "Yes," replied the abbé. "It is very affecting." Mercédès came again, and then she found him so altered that she was even more anxious than before to have him taken to her own home. This was Monsieur Morrel's wish also, who would fain have conveyed the old man against his consent, but the old man resisted, and cried so that they were actually frightened. Mercédès remained, therefore, by his bedside, and Monsieur Morrel went away, making a sign to the Catalan that he had left his purse on the empty chimney-piece. But, availing himself to the doctor's order, the old man would not take any sustenance. At length, after 9 days of despair and fasting, the old man died, cursing those who had caused his misery, and saying to Mercédès, "If you ever see my Edmond again, tell him I die blessing him." The abbé rose from his chair, made 2 turns around the chamber, and pressed his trembling hand against his parched throat. "And did you believe he died?" "Of hunger, sir, of hunger," said Caderousse. "I am as certain of that as we two are Christians." The abbé, with a shaking hand, seized a glass of water that was standing by him half full, swallowed it at one gulp, and then resumed his seat with red eyes and pale cheeks. "This was indeed a horrid event," said he in a hoarse voice. "The more so, sir, as it was men's and not God's doing." Oh, okay, we got a little bit longer of a passage today, which is fine because we got to the end of Daddy Dante's story, tragic story. And again, I don't want to belabor what I said yesterday, but there's this part here where Caderousse goes to the door and he tries to paint himself out to be kind of full of compassion and courage here, where he says, "I then resolved to go up to him at all risks. The door was closed, but I looked through the keyhole and saw him pale and haggard." And then he went and ran off to get Morrel and Mercédès to come and deal with the situation. What risks was he facing there? There's no risks. The risk is that kind of callous thing he said at the very beginning, the very first sentence of this passage. However well disposed a person may be, we leave off after a time seeing persons who are in sorrow, they make one melancholy. And then he goes on to say, so at last old Dante was left all to himself, and only saw strangers from time to time go up to him. So, I mean, what is he saying there? There are still people coming and going. He's kind of downplaying the strangers, quote-unquote strangers, going up and down to him. Who are these strangers? They've got to be common people that would visit Daddy Dante. It's not like he can send for folks. So I think he's kind of shaping the truth a bit here in order to not make himself look so cowardly. And also acknowledging almost outright that, people don't want to go see the sick and the ill because it makes you feel melancholy. And who wants that? He's kind of making it sound like just the course of nature, that when someone is in this sort of situation, it's just, the way of the world, that they're going to be left alone. But then there's really no way to spin the cowardly nature of seeing Daddy Dante and then running off to go get Mercédès and Morrel to deal with the situation rather than doing anything yourself. But let's step back out of Caderousse's story here and into Dante's experience, because he's having to listen to all of this, get the details of what happened to his father for the first time, and man, it must be really enraging to hear someone try to make themselves sound better while delivering such tragic news. Before, Caderousse had, in the previous chapter, talked about the different interpretations of what happened to Daddy Dante at his death, and that the doctor said one thing, the townsfolk said he died of heartbreak, and Caderousse saying, I'll keep it plain and simple, he died of hunger. It's kind of, playing a little bit with Dante's heart. Not that Caderousse knows that, because he doesn't know that this is Dante. We do, don't we, folks? Yes, we do. Even though it hasn't been revealed. But from Dante's perspective, last chapter, he is presented with this idea that he died of starvation. He couldn't take care of himself, and that Dante wasn't there to provide the funds, the, resources to make sure his dad had food and rent and could live comfortably. That's got to weigh on your conscience in terms of guilt. Now Caderousse is going through this story and saying, no, it was kind of abstinence. Yes, it was starvation, but he starved himself almost out of choice. That's a different vibe altogether, and gives a little bit more credence to the townsfolk, the rumors, the gossip, that he did die of grief. Now, should I point out the interesting parallel that Daddy Dante, should we take Caderousse's story for face value, chose to die through starvation, the very method that Dante was attempting to take his own life while imprisoned. If I can get speculative for a moment in terms of theory and literary craft here, that echo between what Dante chose in prison and what his father chose as a free man, but imprisoned by the circumstances that he finds himself in, I think it's very subtly in the audience's mind, in Dante's character, creates a link between the kind of self-righteousness, the personal aspect of the, how do I want to phrase this? Like, it links his father and himself in a very direct way, making it almost a part of him has died. Now, that is true just with his father passing, but I mean, it being almost a very literal sense of part of my identity has died because of this, not only familial link, but this thematic link between my father and myself. So it kind of reinvigorates his quest for vengeance. This is adding fuel to Dante's fire, saying, how dare the folks who let this happen walk free and prosper? It's not just tragedy, it's an indignity. I don't know exactly what to make of, like, the idea that one survives it and one dies from it. Maybe you can let me know. I'd love to hear from you on the Discord. The link is in the show notes. It's free for anyone to join. This is something that I would definitely love your thoughts on. How are we to take this link that Dumas doesn't even really go to any length to highlight? It's just there for us to pick up on, and we have. So what does it mean to you? Let me know, and we'll just continue here with more Chapter 27. We'll talk about it more on the Discord. Until then, okay, goodbye. The Countdown of Monte Cristo is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. This show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. Theme song by Magic Solo. If you want to support the show and others like it, visit patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.